guided reading lesson plan provides a framework for students reading a teacher-selected text on a student's instructional level within a small group setting. And we're continuously reminded of the purpose of guided reading and how we're building strategic readers. And as you are using this lesson plan, it will really provide you time for explicit teaching while supporting individual readers as you listen to them read orally. So we're going to take a look at the different components that make up this lesson plan and discuss how each of the components really support Figure 19's reading comprehension skills, which we know are so important for our students. So as you will notice, you'll begin each lesson with a brief introduction, and your introduction will start all the way up here and go all the way down just before they begin reading the text. And the introduction of the text, or this portion of the lesson, should really only take 5 minutes, really no more. When you're looking at this lesson plan, you're thinking, wow, that's probably a lot that I'm covering in 5 minutes, but it really does go quickly. So you're going to start the lesson off by activating the student's background knowledge by asking a question that is related to the meaning of the text. And this really helps students make connections to ideas or events that will be presented in the text. And then you're going to show them the cover, share them the title of the book or the chapter that they're going to be reading. And it's important that you are the only one holding a copy of the book at this time. And we know that with limited time to really engage the kids in a picture walk or a text preview, with you holding a copy of the book, it will really help alleviate the students from looking through the book at their own leisure. So from there, you're going to provide the students with some general information about the main idea of the text in 1 to 2 sentences while you move into your picture walk, or sometimes I like to call it a book preview. You know, as you get into the older grades, you're not noticing as many illustrations in those fiction texts. So I like to call it a book preview. You're going to preview the text. And the purpose of the picture walk or the text preview is really to notice the important details within the illustrations or the photographs that may provide you with any sort of information about the text while mentioning important vocabulary. And this time should really look like as if you and the students in the group are having a conversation, engaged in a conversation about the text, asking them what they notice. Having students rehearse important vocabulary or unusual language will really help support them in their reading. And before you wrap up your picture walk, you can have your students locate 1 or 2 important words within the text and ask the student to find the word and frame the word. And when I say frame the word, they're going to use their index fingers and place their fingers around the word, and then checking their word by running their index finger underneath the word and checking for that letter sound relationship. And lastly, before you have the students begin reading the text independently, you always want to establish the purpose for reading the text. And this really helps students become authentically engaged in reading while targeting their focus for what they're going to be thinking about while they're reading. So now it's time to kind of get into the reading of the text portion of this lesson plan. And a key ingredient to remember is that your role as teachers while students are reading the portion of the text is really to guide and to coach students throughout their reading. And by constantly interfering with a child's oral reading, we're hindering them from developing into strategic, independent readers. So think of yourself as like a coach, someone's there who's there to support and prompt them in ways to elicit that thinking while they're reading. And a great resource to reference that can support language that you may use to facilitate thinking of your readers is Fountas and Pinnell's Prompting Guides 1 and 2. And I'm going to show you, this is Prompting Guide 1, and it really provides teachers with language for teaching, prompting, and reinforcing effective reading behaviors. And Prompting Guide 2, it provides language for teaching reading readers how to focus or kind of expand their thinking about the text. And by using specific language from this resource, you're reinforcing thinking within, beyond, and about the text. So going back to the lesson plan, during the reading of the text, you're exposing and helping students monitor and adjust their reading and thinking by planting language to promote thinking. So just think of yourself, like I said, as a coach during this. You don't want to interfere and tell them the words that they get stuck on, but prompt them in a way that's going to elicit thinking so that they can problem solve and use text features or their strategies to help them problem solve through unknown words. During this portion of the lesson, you have this whole lesson. It's going to take about 20 minutes. So when you're thinking about what kind of text you want your students to be reading, select a portion of text that's about 100 to 200 words, and that an amount of text that students will be able to read in about 5 to 6 minutes, given the fact that you're probably going to be prompting them throughout their reading. So keep in mind that longer text will need to be chunked and broken up amongst a few or many days. So we're going to move into the after the reading of the text part. So after the students complete their reading, you're going to discuss the meaning and go back to tying in the purpose for reading. And you're going to ask some right there questions to promote their thinking within the text. So those right there questions, the questions that they're going to have to remember the important events or important information that came up in their reading. And then to promote the student thinking beyond the text, you're going to brainstorm a question that you can come up with that really will require the students to make inferences about the text. And always have them support their thinking with textual evidence. So have them go back in the text and actually prove how they know or where that thinking came from. What text clues really is going to help support their thinking. Number 2, it says you're going to be sure to praise the students for behaviors that you noticed while listening to individual students read the text. This really helps to build students' confidence in reading while reinforcing things that they're doing well, and you want to continue to see them do while they're reading. And many of the behaviors that you're going to praise these students are now what we call, they're just natural tendencies, but what one student may be doing well may be an area of growth for another in the group. So highlight on the certain things that the kids are doing because it may be something that another student in the group needs to hear. And after praising the students, you're going to select one teaching point that's going to help wrap up your lesson. And if you get anything from this whole video, please remember that selecting a teaching point is one of the most important things in this whole lesson plan. You want the students to walk away with something that they can take with them and carry on with their independent reading. So you're going to select one teach point for the lesson that will more than likely be something that you have observed from the students while they were reading the text. And your teaching point may be a fix-it-up strategy. So it may be something that's going to help them grow as a reader, that's going to offer them the opportunity to practice independently when they're reading by themselves or with a partner. And these types of strategies are important to select as teaching points if you're noticing students are neglecting them, because this is going to help build them into strategic readers. Another option that you have for your teaching point might be a word work lesson. So if you happen to notice that a majority of the students in the group were not able to recognize a high frequency word in the text or a word that follows a particular spelling pattern, then you may make that your teaching point. And we know that high frequency words are very essential for kids to be able to recognize and read with automaticity. And it's going to be words that they're going to come across later on in many, many texts. So find ways to incorporate maybe magnetic letters or allow students to practice building high frequency words, or write them on a dry erase board with a marker when you're reinforcing maybe high frequency words or spelling pattern words. And lastly, you may select to teach a comprehension strategy. And these strategies are extremely important to model for students so they develop into strategic independent readers. And when selecting a comprehension strategy as your teaching point for a guided reading lesson, you really want to model for the students what this looks like and allow them time to practice it briefly. And many of you may be asking yourself right now, well, how do I decide what to teach my students? I notice so many different things that I could teach them, but remember, you want to focus on one thing. And as you get more familiar with your students as readers, by listening to them read and having conversations with them about their reading, you'll be able to select what is most important, what's going to be most critical for this student or this group of students at this time that's going to make the greatest impact and propel them forward in their reading. So keep in mind that your teaching point should be a skill or a strategy that can be transferable and can be applied to any text that they sit down and read. You want them to be practicing those skills independently on their own and not just with you in this group setting. So after you've made your teaching point, allow the students time to practice independently with support. And then finally, you're going to select a page or a portion from the text that you would like to read together as a group. So the students and the teacher, they're reading the text together, just a little portion to reinforce the fluent reading. And this really helps students to rehearse proper phrasing and intonation when reading orally. So that is the overview of the recommended guided reading lesson plan for Frisco. I'm hoping that this was very helpful and that you find yourself with a little bit more clarity around this document and how it really supports building strategic and independent readers. The best way to become comfortable and well-versed with using this lesson plan is really just to practice and rehearse it daily.